all, and welcome to Opera Echoes, Who is My Neighbor? I'm Danny Kyle, Director of Community Engagement at Tulsa Opera, and I am so thrilled that you decided to spend your Monday evening with us as we explore the power of opera, the power of music, and the power of story to connect us in that special way art can to our shared humanity. Opera Echoes creates a community conversation inspired by the themes in an upcoming Tulsa Opera production. Tonight, as we reflect on the story of the real Von Trapps, remembering that the sound of music isn't just a great love story, we're asking the question, who is my neighbor? We'll hear musical performances from the Philstrip Resident Artist Company. On piano, Kisan Rostov, and singers Margaret Stahl, Jeremiah Tyson, and Maddie Breedlove. I'm so grateful for our partners, ACTION Tulsa, the YWCA, and the Sherwin Museum of Jewish Art. Please welcome Chief Museum Officer and Deputy Director of SMMJA, Tracy Hurst Woods.
Welcome, everyone. For those of you that have never been here before, this is the Sherwin Museum of Jewish Art. We have been a part of this community since 1966. We moved onto this campus in 2003, and now we are under the umbrella of the Jewish Federation of Tulsa. And behind me is our 4 stained glass windows that are our pride and joy of our collection. They came to us from the Santon family, from a Houston synagogue that closed for urban renewal, and they were auctioned off, and they were dedicated and put in memory of Scott Santon, who passed away in 2000 in his memory, and so now they adorn our lobby for all to enjoy. We have, in 2020, we opened our new Holocaust Center, the Santon Kaiser Holocaust Center, where we bring in all the 8th grade students from Tulsa Public School, and so it's part of their yearly curriculum, and we have a great docent corps that is able to really do wonders in teaching about the Holocaust and Jewish history and culture, and we have a few here tonight, so thank you for coming. We have different sections of our museum that you're all welcome to go after this is over and enjoy. We have open in our Brodsky Gallery upstairs in the back the Fiddler on the Roof exhibit, and it's really a fun exhibit, so if you want to go up there, it's really great. And we have just opened up, we haven't even had the opening reception for it yet, Sacred Land, and it's a photography exhibit showcasing different points of view of Israel, and it's a really amazing show. But we are so glad that you all are here and enjoying our space, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you. And next up is Molly Bryant.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Molly Bryant, and I am the Senior Director of Immigrant and Refugee Services here at the YWCA in Tulsa. Many of you know about the YWCA from our gyms, which are really great. But the YWCA USA has been on the front lines of serving immigrants and refugees since 1894, when they started a traveler's aid program to protect women immigrating by ship. YWCA USA began offering bilingual instruction to immigrant women in 1909, developed cultural orientation programs in World War I, and later extended services to Japanese American women and girls incarcerated in internment camps. YWCA is also listed on Ellis Island as being a welcoming organization providing services to newly arrived immigrants. And locally, the YWCA Tulsa has been dedicated to serving immigrants and refugees for more than 35 years. And we continue to be focused on addressing systemic barriers for newcomers, eliminating those barriers, and investing in the success of those who have come to our community to build a new life through legal services, social support services, and English language classes. And now I'm going to pass it off to Kelly.
address the issues in our community. We are a radically nonpartisan and hyper-local political organization. Our work casts a vision for democracy that includes every person in our community. Since June, we have educated 550 attendees at our community events called Who is My Neighbor? Through myth-busting and storytelling. We're grateful to be here, sharing research data about immigration through the lens of the sound of music. Davey?
Tulsa Opera is proud to open our 2025-26 main stage season with The Sound of Music. Not only does the production feature well-loved music by Rodgers and Hammerstein, it is a timeless story of love, courage, and family. In a year when many are seeking comfort and connection, this musical offers a warm and familiar narrative and themes of hope and resilience during dark times. Please help me welcome Margaret Stahl to sing The Sound of Music.
Since our founding in 2013, we
We have heard stories about the complicated reality of immigration in general and the experience of immigrants here in Tulsa. We've learned that immigration and citizenship are subjects that require tact and sensitivity. We approach them with different images in mind. Maybe the first thing you think of when you hear the word immigration is the Statue of Liberty and scenes of ships arriving at Ellis Island. For many citizens of the United States, a relative made the courageous decision to come here for new opportunities or to escape violence and persecution. For others, their ancestors were here before colonial settlers. In Oklahoma, many tribes are represented. Still other Americans know that their ancestors were forcibly brought here through the transatlantic slave trade. In this room, we come with many different origin stories. If you have specific questions about immigration, please write them down on the cards that were provided on your chairs, and we will address them later in our time together. The first story we will share today is from the Trapp family themselves.
Good evening. I'm Jennifer White. I'm an immigration attorney with the YWCA Tulsa Legal Department. I work with Molly Bryant, and I have the really fun job tonight of sharing with you the Trapp immigration story. I have a few spoilers also about the sound of music. I also have about 10 more pages of notes that I'm not allowed to use because they gave me a time limit. So if anybody needs to get coffee later, I can share more with you about that. But I'll stick to the script. I also have the privilege of being the assistant stage director for The Sound of Music. I'm also playing Sister Margaretta, and my son is playing Friedrich. So if anybody in this group babysits or drives or wants to shuttle children to activities, just please let me know. I'm very tired. This beloved musical is inspired by the real-life story of the Trapp family, but their real-life experience is actually more complicated than the movie and the stage version would lead you to believe. In 1927, Captain George von Trapp, a decorated Austro-Hungarian naval hero, married Maria Augusta Kochira, a former novice nun who had been hired as a tutor for one of the children who was homesick with scarlet fever, which killed the mother of the Von Trapp children. Maria Augusta revealed in her memoir that she fell in love with the children first, not the captain. She said she liked the captain, but she really loved the children, so they got married. And eventually, she learned to love the captain too, and they had many more children. 10 to be exact, not 7. Also different from the musical, the children could already sing. Maria taught them madrigals and new music to love, but they were already a musical family, and the captain was actually a very loving father. During the Great Depression, the Von Trapp lost all of their finances when the London bank where they housed all their money collapsed. So to support themselves, they started the Von Trapp family singers and began traveling and singing as a family to earn money. On March 12, 1938, Nazi Germany annexed Austria into the Ausschuss, which is a political union that divided the country. The Von Trapps were staunchly anti-Nazi. In fact, the captain turned down a naval commission from the Nazi regime, and historically, they are famous for having also turned down the opportunity to sing for Hitler. Faced with the threat of the regime, naturally, the family orchestrated their own escape in July of 1938. But contrary to the dramatized version of the scene of climbing through the Alps with a few suitcases while the music and the birds are singing above them and the weather is beautiful, they simply boarded a train for Italy because the captain had Italian citizenship. So they went to Italy and then they went on tour. Their journey led them across Europe as the Trapp family singers performing concerts until a concert promoter invited them to the United States. They arrived in 1938 on temporary visitor visas, which we still have today. While there, their musical fame combined with a clean immigration history and the need for humanitarian humanitarian allowance for prominent anti-Nazis helped them navigate the U.S. immigration policies. However, their initial visas expired, and they overstayed their visas. I'm not sure if you know what we call that today, but they were illegal. They were undocumented. They were actually deported from the United States. So see, it gets a little more complicated than the story goes. They briefly returned to Europe before successfully re-entering the United States with renewed documents in 1939. But how did they renew their documentation when they had violated our immigration laws, which is a big no-no, also still today? It's because they know people. With the help of a friend, the Secretary of Labor, Francis Perkins, their visas were expedited, and a congressman filed something called a private bill. They were deemed worthy to adjust their status to lawful permanent residence, due in part because of their fleeing the Nazis, yes, but also because they were determined to be culturally valuable. We still have some of those immigration laws today of cultural value and special skills and services. We'll get more into that later. By 1940, however, the family found a new home in Vermont, and they were attracted to it because it reminded them of the Alps. And they ran a music camp, and they had farm animals, and it really was kind of beautiful, again, like the movie shows you. But this is before we changed some of our immigration laws. I do have to give up the microphone now, but I'm just saying, pages and pages of notes.
My name is Lynn Minden. I'm a leader with ACTION, and I'm the chair of our immigration team. So the Von Trapp family experienced economic collapse, their homeland's invasion by neighboring government, suppression of their beliefs, and political oppression. They escaped to save their lives. It sounds a lot like why people migrate today. But before we get into the reasons why, let's clarify some of the terms we're using. So we're going to use the term immigrant broadly to mean a person who has chosen to come to the United States from their country of origin. An undocumented immigrant is someone who is living in the United States without legal authorization, such as a visa, a green card, or other valid status. And later in this presentation, we will delineate other categories of immigrants, like refugees and asylum seekers. So, what does the immigrant community look like in Tulsa? Based on a 2022 survey, the most recent data for the American Immigration Council says there are approximately 41,600 immigrants living in Tulsa, which is about 10% of the city's population. 13% of Tulsa households have at least one immigrant resident, and 4,500 children are immigrants. Currently, students in Tulsa public schools speak 67 different languages, with common languages including Spanish, Chuquici, Pashto, and Hmong. Additionally, more than 37% of students speak a language other than English at home. And students come from more than 65 countries. The number of languages spoken by students in Tulsa public schools helps us have an imagination for all the stories that these students and their families carry about immigration. Of the more than 41,000 immigrants living in Tulsa, almost half of them are undocumented. But a quarter of all immigrants living in Tulsa hold a bachelor's degree. So immigrant-led households in Tulsa have a total household income of $1.3 billion and pay a total of $324 million in taxes, of which $205 million are federal taxes and $119 million are state and local taxes. The spending power of Tulsa's immigrant community is $995 million a year. That is almost $1 billion into our local economy every year. So, both documented and undocumented Tulsans are paying taxes. Despite institutional the contrary, the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy reported in 2022 that all immigrants living in Oklahoma paid $760 million in state and local taxes. Those who are undocumented paid $227 million of these state and local taxes, which included more than $51 million in personal and business income taxes. Because undocumented immigrants do not qualify for many tax deductions and tax credit, most notably the earned income tax credit and the child tax credit, they pay a higher effective tax rate than the top 1% of Oklahoma households. In 2022, their effective tax rate was 8.9% compared to 6.4% for the top 1% of Oklahoma taxpayers.
Some might ask, how do undocumented immigrants pay taxes if they cannot obtain a Social Security number? Undocumented immigrants who pay taxes use an ITIN, an individual taxpayer identification number. It's a 9-digit number formatted similarly to a Social Security number. The next question might be, why would an undocumented immigrant choose to pay taxes utilizing an ITIN? Paying taxes demonstrates compliance with tax obligations and federal law and can help as proof of good moral character when pursuing citizenship. Filing tax documents also preserves work history and proof of presence in the United States, should Congress ever choose to change the complicated path to citizenships. ITINs also help undocumented individuals open a bank account, obtain a home mortgage, and secure a driver's license in some states, although not in Oklahoma. An ITIN is required for an undocumented immigrant to do business as an independent contractor or to start their own business. Even when paying into these government obligations, undocumented persons do not qualify for government safety net programs, including Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, food stamps, Pell Grants, other federal education assistance, or public housing assistance. As we said earlier, the spending power of Tulsa's immigrant community is $995 million, almost $1 billion, into our local economy each year. Immigrants also fuel our local economy through labor and entrepreneurship. Immigrants comprise approximately 80% of Oklahoma's workforce and 14% of Tulsa's total workforce. But their contribution is vital in key industries such as landscaping services, where they are 30% of the workforce, and construction, where 18% of workers are immigrants. Immigrant entrepreneurs own businesses that contribute to our economy. There are more than 20,000 Hispanic-owned businesses in Oklahoma. Locally, 1 in 5 business owners is an immigrant. Maybe you've been to the Tulsa Local District, centered at 21st and Garnett. It's home to more than 200 small businesses, primarily owned by Hispanic and Asian American Pacific Islander residents. These small business owners, families, and community leaders are growing our community. Even in transplanted ground, our immigrant neighbors in Tulsa bloom, just like the storied Edelweiss in the Austrian hills. I'd like to welcome Jeremiah to sing Edelweiss.
Edelweiss,
Many left careers as lawyers, doctors, accountants, engineers, and other well-paying jobs due to violence or persecution in their country of origin. Upon arriving to the United States, they discovered that language barriers and differences in professional guidelines meant that they couldn't continue in those careers. So instead, they had to begin working in whatever position was available in order to provide for their families. The Von Trapp's fame made their resettlement and naturalization an easier road. Simply put, there was enough popular and political will to welcome them to the U.S. before the United States was directly involved in World War II. Most important to note, there was a different system than we have today, but what is very clear from Jennifer's story is that sometimes it's who you know that gets you where you need to go. One of the most common questions ACTION has heard when people hear about our work is, why don't undocumented people get in line to become legal? You're welcome to gasp or laugh at that chart, okay? If you were to ask this question of any immigration attorney, Jennifer, their first response might be, which line? America's immigration system is complex, as shown by this flowchart of ways to obtain a green card. Many Americans' immigrant ancestors who arrived here between 1790 and 1924 would not have been allowed under the current policy. Generally, permission to enter and stay in the country as a documented immigrant is limited to people who are highly trained in a skill that is in short supply here and have been offered a job by a U.S. employer, are escaping political persecution, or are joining close family already here, or are winners of the storied green card lottery. Unless you qualify under one of these categories, there is no way for you to obtain a legal status or become documented in the United States. In other words, for many of our undocumented neighbors, there is no line to get into.
So let's talk about a few of the more common ways someone can obtain documentation and why. Even when there is a line, it may not result in documentation. For someone who does qualify through a visa program, there are limits on the number of visas that can be granted each year per category. If you do have a pathway to a legal status in this manner, the wait times can be staggering due to these limits. One common myth is that anyone who has a family member already legally in the United States can also obtain a legal status. However, the limit for family visas is 226,000 each year, and that limit is further broken down into limits by country. So as an example, if I am a U.S. citizen and wish to sponsor my sister, who is a citizen of Mexico, the current wait is 24 years for a visa to become available to her. For me to sponsor my unmarried child, who is a Mexican citizen, the wait time is 19 years. These limits apply to other categories of visas as well. For instance, many categories of employment-related visas have more applicants than available visas. So individuals could wait years before they can come to work for the company sponsoring them. I'd like to invite Jennifer to share about refugees and asylum seekers. By today's standards, this is a likely route that the Von Trapps would have found themselves pursuing if they were coming to the United States today.
That's true. They were technically fleeing a country of persecution. They politically did not align with their country soldiers. Although they were technically fleeing the Nazis, the Von Trapps were not refugees by the current definition of their time. In fact, the refugee definition was more clearly defined later after they'd already become U.S. citizens by the Displaced Persons Act of 1948. In fact, by that time, all of the Von Trapps, except for the captain, were United States citizens. 2 of them became citizens by serving in World War II. A refugee is someone who has been forced to flee their country because of persecution, war, or violence due to their race, ethnicity, religion, membership in a social group, or political opinion, but is not currently residing in the United States. Some are living in refugee camps. Some have been born in refugee camps while their families wait for placement in a safe country. Like most avenues to obtain authorization to be in the United States, the refugee process is lengthy and complicated. First, the United Nations registers refugees seeking a new home and then refers them to countries accepting refugees. Refugees are not just able to go to any country that they choose. For those that are referred to the United States, an extensive screening process lasting 18 to 24 months is required for admission. This screening includes collecting biometric data, which are reviewed by multiple agencies, including the Department of State, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the Department of Defense, and the Customs and Borders Patrol. Any findings from any of these security checks must be cleared before the individual is approved for entry into the United States. For some, the findings will bar them from entry and acceptance into the refugee program. Travel to America is then arranged only after an applicant has passed this extensive screening process, and the refugees are not given a free plane to the United States. Instead, they have to take out a loan from the International Office of Migration, which they have to pay back for their trip to the United States. Once a refugee arrives in America, they are supported by a resettlement agency such as Catholic Charities, Rising Village and Congregation Benai and Mana, typically during the first 3 months to help them obtain housing, find medical support, and get settled into their new homes and cities. And then they are referred to the YWCA for the next 5 years to assist with employment, language, and to further settle into American life. I also filed a green card applications for them. Those who come to America as a refugee do have a pathway to citizenship after they've lived here for 6 years. Unfortunately, the Trump administration has caused significant chaos to the refugee program over the last 9 months. It's been real busy. With pauses to services and drastic cuts to funding, travel bans, lowering the total number of refugees who are allowed in the United States, and a shift towards welcoming Afrikaners in place of other populations, many critical services needed to support refugees have been disrupted or completely eliminated in the United States. And I'd like to welcome my colleague Molly to share more with you about asylum seekers.
So finally, let's talk about asylum. Those who are seeking asylum in our country. So an asylee is a person who has been granted asylum. So you hear a lot about asylum seekers on our border. Those are people who have not yet been granted asylum. They're just asking for relief. So it is a person who meets the definition of a refugee that Jennifer just mentioned, but is already in the United States or presents themselves at a port of entry, so a border. To receive asylum, an individual is required to provide evidence demonstrating that they have suffered persecution in their home country or have a well-founded fear of persecution if they were to return. And this is, again, like with being a refugee, it's on account of your race, your religion, your membership of a social group, or your politics. While this is a valid legal way for someone to obtain legal status in the United States, there are several aspects of this process that make it really difficult. And it is often an unsuccessful path that leaves millions without legal status while the process plays out before them. So first, visa or work permit, but they cannot receive social benefits. So they are not receiving, again, what we talked about, Medicaid, Medicare, Sooner Care, any of that. During that long wait for their claim to be resolved in court, these individuals often become valued members of our community. If they have to return to their home country, especially after such a significant amount of time away, there's a significant associated trauma that comes with that. In addition, the chances of even being granted asylum in the United States depend on several key factors, of which are out of everyone's control. Most importantly is the factor of where the asylum seeker is coming from. What is their home country? Also, whether they have a lawyer, and which immigration judge, specific immigration judge, is assigned to their case. So, overall, fewer than half of all asylum applications are approved in the United States. After reaching a high of 52% in September of 2023, 52% was the high, the national approval rate steadily declined and is just at 36% as of right now. That's 36% nationally, but not necessarily for those in Tulsa who are seeking asylum. Approval rates are even lower from people from Central America and South America. For example, during fiscal year 2024, asylum seekers from Mexico and the Dominican Republic were approved less than 20% of the time. That means 80% were denied. In Oklahoma, asylum seekers must attend immigration court in Dallas. Outcomes there can vary widely, depending on the judge you get. One Dallas judge, the notorious Judge Sims, has an approval rate of 4%. Yeah, I have to name him because it's important. This is all public data. But unlike in criminal court, people in immigration court are not guaranteed, they're not given a representative, a lawyer. So many asylum seekers cannot afford legal representation, most cannot, which significantly lowers their chance of success. Those who represent themselves who are unable to afford a lawyer have an approval rate nationally of 19%. So to understand, that's a lot of numbers, it's a lot of facts, but to understand what the numbers really mean, I want to tell you about a young family I met in 2019 whenever we were on the border in Matamoros during the Remain in Mexico policy. So people at the time and currently were living in tents along the U.S.-Mexico border. There was some news around that, but there were thousands of people congregating on the Mexican side of the U.S.-Mexico border. And I had the opportunity to go down and interview asylum seekers. This young woman was in her early 20s. She was holding her 9-month-old baby as she had her interview. She held her up close as she spoke. The baby was giggling and laughing and having a really great time because we had games and candy and stuff. The baby was giggling while she shared this harrowing story of seeking safety. She and her husband had fled Honduras after receiving death threats from a local gang. She was not a criminal, she was not a political leader. She was a young woman in her early 20s who had simply tried to make her neighborhood safer. After she was elected as a neighborhood representative, her first project was to fix broken streetlights that had left her community vulnerable to nighttime violence. For the first time in years, light returned to her streets, but within a week, the bulbs were smashed again. The lights went out. The next morning, a note appeared on her doorstep: "Stop, or you will be killed." She, this amazing woman, refused to give in. She went to the local police, just as we say you should do, right? She went to the local police, but instead of protection, she was told there was nothing they could do. When she persisted, the threats turned into an attack. One night, masked men broke into her home, beat her and her husband, and threatened to kill their child. She recognized one of the men, though. It was the same police officer who had taken her report. With nowhere to turn for safety, the family fled Honduras the next day. They traveled more than 1,500 miles, mostly on foot and by freight trains, by cartels in Mexico, losing everything they had, which was not very much. By the time they reached the U.S. border, all they carried with them was their child and a desperate hope for protection. So when they arrived, they learned that seeking asylum was not as simple as asking for safety. They were forced to wait in dangerous border camps under U.S. policies that pushed asylum seekers back into Mexico. For months, they lived in a tent with hundreds of others, thousands of others, all hoping for a chance to present their case. These numbers, approval rates, court statistics, and percentages can seem abstract, but behind every number is a story like this one. A mother who dared to make her community safer, a family betrayed by their government, and a child whose life now depends on whether a judge believes their fear is real enough to deserve protection.
So with this one family's story in mind, reflective of thousands of others who are waiting to build their own American dream, let's return to the Von Trapp family story. In 1942, 2 years after settling in Stowe, Vermont, they transformed their property into the Trapp family lodge, establishing a successful family business and a beloved tourist destination that endures today. The family's patriarch, Captain George Von Trapp, passed away in 1944. However, the family's legacy was secured when Maria published her memoir, The Story of the Trapp Family Singers, in 1948. This book became the inspiration for the world-famous Broadway musical and the 1965 film, The Sound of Music. In 1950, Maria and most of the children solidified their new identity by becoming naturalized U.S. citizens. Though they continued touring as the Trapp Family Singers until 1955, their true legacy lies in the spirit of resilience, the love of music, and the courage that allowed them to leave behind a threatened homeland, embrace a new life, and become an indelible part of American cultural history. Immigrants today looking for their own path to citizenship may find insurmountable barriers. By learning about their experiences, we discover that courage, love, and hope aren't just found in the musical or the Von Trapp family's experience, but in the lives of everyday people faced with the impossible reality of staying where they are and facing death or fleeing to build a new life. We now welcome Maddie Riedla forward to sing Climb and Win.
take the next 90 seconds to 2 minutes to turn to your neighbor and share what stood out to you. Was it our artist? Yes, obviously. If there is something that has come out and sticks out to you from the Von Trapp's family experience, from the story that Molly wonderfully shared with us, or from the facts, turn to your neighbor. I'm going to time you. Yeah, no test, just genuine sharing. Curriculum, okay? We narrowed it down and to focus significantly on the things that were either super local or connected to the story in the musical. And each time we have included this sharing moment. First off, it's a skill building exercise. We live in a culture that is continually siloed from folks who may be different than us. And the only way to get out of that is to do it. To talk to someone you may not have met before and share something that you both just experienced. Now, the other thing that I want you to know is that according to the Pew Research Foundation, the most common way people get their local information is by word of mouth, phone, or in person from people they know in their community. When we try to dig into local issues, it's often in a cloud of misinformation. But the best way to break through misinformation is by opening up our big mouths and telling people what we just learned about. Okay? Yeah. Now, thank you for sharing with your neighbor and gaining some information and hearing incredible artists share with us from the musical. ACTION is a radically nonpartisan organization that works to collaborate with public officials to enact meaningful change. I now invite Rana to come forward to share information about the letter that was in your seat. Rana's going to come forward, and then if you wrote down a question on your 3x5 card, please pass it towards the center. This is not actually the center, but pass it towards this break, and I will collect them so that we can answer those questions you may have. Rana?
Did you all know that Senator Langford has sponsored federal legislation to reform the federal immigration system more than once? We want to thank him for his previous efforts and ask him to continue work on behalf of our immigrant neighbors. One of the papers on the chairs was a note to Senator Langford. It's a chance to convey to him thanks and ask him to continue working toward immigration reform. Specifically, Representative Salazar has reintroduced the Dignity Act, which proposes sweeping changes to our immigration policy. The first time since the Immigration Reform and Control Act, YWCA, of 1986 passed and was signed into law under President Ronald Reagan. The Dignity Act is currently sponsored by 12 Republican and 11 Democrat representatives. If you do sign one of the letters, please be sure to identify yourself and also a personal message. Action can deliver these messages to the senator in November at a
All right, the question I got was, what support can everyday people give to immigrants in our community? I would say, so the presentation that you had part of tonight came out of a comment. Before we did this, we met with over 20 different people, organizations, employers in town who work with or are members of the immigrant community. And in one of those meetings, an immigrant said, I just wish people would hear our story and understand that we're just good people and we're not criminals. We're just trying to take care of our families. And so I think one thing we can all do is share this information. If you hear somebody say something about the illegals in our country and everybody that's undocumented needs to go back to where they came from, or one of those comments, be bold and say something about it. There are many organizations in our community that take care of our immigrant neighbors. The YWCA is one, El Centro is one, Rising Village and Catholic Charities and Congregation B'nai Yehuna all work with refugees and have lost funding sources. So if you're looking somewhere to donate your resources, I think that's what I would say.
Okay, I've got a few. Here's an easy one. How much of your funding, and other immigration grants decreased during this administration? For the YWCA, it was $6.5 million out of $8 million. So pretty drastically. Refugee resettlement agencies were either paused or completely cut. Most everything related to immigration has either been on basically a permanent pause or has not been, contracts have not been fulfilled. So we had a grant, a lot of our grants are through the Office of Refugee Resettlement, and that entire national agency has basically shut down. But that's the entire refugee process. So Congregation B'nai Yehuna, Catholic Charities, Rising Village, YWCA, we were all cut in funding, as well as we have classes to help people get their citizenship, to pass their tests, to be able to apply for citizenship. That was completely cut, as well as we recently got news, not unexpected news, but we did get news that our grant that assisted victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking would not be renewed this next year. So funding has halted pretty drastically, and it is a risk to say you work in immigration right now, and it is a risk with funding. I love this. Can anything be done about Judge Sims, Mr. 4%? I have some thoughts on that. But unfortunately, he's not an anomaly. So he's the worst in Dallas, but the next worst in Dallas has like a 6% approval rating. There are some jurisdictions across the country that generally have like a higher average, closer to like 40 to 50%. But for the most part, while Judge Sims he's been around forever, and so we all just have issues with him because we've all had clients with him. He is unfortunately just a part of the process. He's standard for this process. And so while there are things that could be done, that's probably not where we want to put our energy. And then another question was similar, how do we stop the defamation remarks against immigrants by our less knowledgeable neighbors, which is a very kind way of saying that. It is just, like you mentioned, I think by not letting those remarks stop, or continue, sorry, by stopping them. But so I will just share with you, my stepdad says things about immigration, which is very bold of him to say them in front of me, but it ranges, right? Your relationship with people is how you're gonna actually change minds. I will say there are some people who you're not going to. And again, it's figuring out where do you put your energy. But I never let a remark slide, even if I'm known to go, or like, I don't know. And so maybe I don't want to engage in the entire conversation, but I never let someone say something without at least some type of facial remark, or depending on my relationship with them, I say, okay, let's talk about this. So I think what you all are doing is exactly what you should be doing. So not letting those slide and not letting them become normal around you.
This card is asking what happens to rejected asylum seekers and what happens to their children. And they are told to deport. And in some cases, they are forcibly deported. We have asylum seekers who have been waiting for more than a decade for their asylum applications. One was just approved, a gentleman from Russia who applied almost 11 years ago. It takes a long time. Similarly, we have clients who were here under something called temporary protected status. They may have come from countries like Cuba, or Syria, or Venezuela, or Colombia, and they were given protected status because the administration at the time determined that their countries were unsafe and not a viable nationality and citizenship for them. So they were here and they were documented and working with work authorization, and during the current administration that was immediately rescinded and revoked, and they were told to self-deport. So we have individuals here who did everything right, who now have suddenly overnight no work authorization, and they have the option of filing for asylum, and a lot of asylum attorneys are charging anywhere between $5,000 to $15,000 for an asylum application. It's a lot of work to file for asylum. We've met with a lot of clients from Cuba who are currently in the process of filing for asylum, who are unable to work, and so they do receive the benefit of some either completely waived legal fees or very, 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 very reduced legal fees with our office. But what happens to their children? They go too. That's just the way it is. And what can we do when Kristi Noem says, return to your home country with our help? How easy is it for them to return and go through a legalized process to become legal as citizens? Well, if you are told to go home with our help and you are deported back to your home country that is currently under a travel ban, you don't. There's no way for you to get back and go through a legal process. And also, you have to be present in the United States to file for asylum. So if we deport you, and you haven't had the opportunity to seek protection of asylum, a pending asylum case, you're just out of luck. That's all there is to it. I sound like my job is really, really sad and horrible. It is really sad and horrible, but it's also really hopeful and really lovely and beautiful, because when people do come to our office and we have a legal pathway for them and we're able to help provide them with free or reduced cost legal services, it is a beautiful, beautiful line of work. So I don't want you to think that we are just never see any ray of sunshine in our office. But there are some hard things too.
How could I get involved with ACTION? I will say that immigration is not the only issue that ACTION is involved with. I don't know if you all are familiar with the crossing guard situation, but ACTION was involved with that, and that was one of our success stories because we were able to have the city set aside funds to hire additional crossing guards for the children that were having to cross busy streets to get to school every day. And so if you go out and you do ACTIONTulsa.com, that's our website.
Or I'm
Center is actively seeking volunteers. So connect with me if that's something you're interested in. I met with their executive director this morning. My question is, have you had success changing the minds of state and local officials? Yes. And it's rooted in a little bit of what Molly was talking about, of deepening relationships with those who we may disagree with on a whole host of issues, but being brave enough, curious enough, persistent enough to keep finding the places where our commitments align. Those places are a lot more voluminous than you would imagine. Particularly, my first career was as a pastor. I spent 20 years working in churches, and I think it's part of why I love getting to do this work this way as an organizer for action, is because we get to help people draw out the commitments they have from a wide range of spaces. Their religious commitments, their Tulsa Classroom Teachers Association and their commitments towards education, the Tulsa SPCA, which is a member institution that has leaders here. We get to find how those align, and that's what we do with state and local officials, is we find the places that we can agree on. We build wins that belong to everyone, and then we trust each other enough to know that we're not in it to be right. We're in it to do what's good for our community. Sometimes those things align, but most of the time, what's good for our community is really granular, and we only get there when we start to share with each other who we really are. So, Danny?
Thank you. Okay, I have one more question, and it's the burning one for the artists in the room. We get asked this type of question all the time. Why do you think this story, the sound of music, continues to resonate across generations and cultures? And to help me answer this question, please welcome Sam Briggs, who will be playing the captain on the
That is such a wonderful question. Hi everybody, thank you all so much for being here. I'm also a staff member at Tulsa Opera, and so it's lovely to see all of you here today. There's a line that sticks out in Act 1 that the captain says. He's speaking to Elsa Schrader, who is his betrothed, his fiancée, and Max Detweiler, who is sort of a cultural czar. He's our Ken Busby in Tulsa. And Max is taking phone calls from Berlin. And the captain is not very fond of that, because the captain is very staunchly dug his heels in, and he sort of sees what's coming. And Act 1 is sort of this backdrop of these political bubblings, and they're talking very casually about it, until suddenly in Act 2 it's become a reality. And I know that the time and place that we live in now feels very bubbly. Sometimes not in a great way. But the line that the captain says is, Elsa has asked him to throw this lavish party at the end of Act 1 for her, as a baroness does. And he says, I wouldn't know whom to invite. Today it's difficult to tell who's a friend and who's an enemy. And it really sticks with me, because I am, well, like many of you, on a 24/7 news cycle. But the thing that I love that The Sound of Music does is, even though it sort of focuses on this love story that we all fall in love with, and is, decades, it was written decades ago, it speaks to us in a way that is really easy to take in. And I think that's one thing that art, particularly in bubbly political times, does, is make things really digestible for us. It's easy to go to a theater and sit and listen to beautiful music and watch beautiful people tell a lovely story. And it's my hope that this Sound of Music will maybe sit with you a little longer than just popping it on at Thanksgiving with Grandma and the turkey. And really feel that what we're telling may be happening now. And of course, in its own context, right? We live in a political world. There are political stories to tell. And I hope that you'll come and join us on November 15th at the Bantri's Pace, where you'll see me play my best guitar in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. I look forward to seeing your captain. And thank you to all of you for taking the time tonight to engage with us on this topic. Your willingness to understand and care for your neighbors in Tulsa is vital. Tulsa Opera is so grateful for this partnership with Sherwin Museum for Jewish Art. It's just gorgeous in here. And with ACTION Tulsa, and with the YWCA. Tracy, Kelly, Molly, Rana, Jennifer, you all worked really, really hard on this, and I appreciate it so much, and your willingness to collaborate with me. Let's hear it for those Philstra resident artists.